Hello, I'm David Eford, and the title of this presentation is A New Approach to Understanding the Caitya Hall at Karle. The Caitya Hall at Karle is an exceptionally well-preserved example of early Buddhist architecture, utilizing an abundance of carved elements in its sculptural program and hundreds of sculpted figures throughout the cave. Many of its figural subjects are matuna, typically composed of male-female pairs interacting through the act of touch. Despite an impressive array of elements and figures, its entire sculptural program has garnered little attention, or the extent that the Caitya Hall followed an intentional plan for arranging its myriad architectural elements and figural sculptures. This study reveals that a proportional system guided not only the execution of architectural space, but also arrangements of sculptures and adornments. As one of the most well-preserved early Buddhist works, the Caitya Hall at Karle demonstrates an intentionality of design in its creation that counters suggestions that anomalies in ornamentation are the result of happenstance, mistakes, or outside influences impinging upon the intent of its creators. The highly coordinated program, executed in an era plagued by regional conflict and instabilities, achieved completion due to robust patronage at the site and under strict control in which an underlying mathematical or numerical planning could be expressed. Dating from the 1st century CE, the Caitya Hall is located in the Malwa region of Maharashtra state, within several kilometers of the Buddhist caves near Bhaja and Bedsa, and consists of an outer courtyard with a Simhastamba, or monumental pillar with lion imagery on its capital, a veranda fronted by a rock-cut screen, and a pillared central hall sheltering a stupa surrounded by a pradakshina or path for circumambulation. Most of the rock cut remains date from the early Buddhist era, with the exception of reliefs depicting Buddhas and Bodhisattvas carved into the walls of the veranda dating from a later era of Buddhist occupation in approximately the 5th century CE. Over 30 inscriptions from the outer court, veranda, and interior have been documented, including inscriptions referring to eras of rule during the reigns of the Kshatrata Nahavana, who was a Western Kshatripa, and later Satavahana monarchs. Many inscriptions record pious donations of lay worshippers and monastics, including several of the former who identify themselves as Yavanas, likely reference to Indo-Greeks whose presence in the region seemed to have coincided with the general period in which the Kshatrata occupation of the Western Deccan took place. The post-Buddhist history of the site is not well documented until the 18th century. A Hindu temple to the goddess Ekvira stands in the courtyard opposite the Simhastamba, presumably where another colossal pillar once stood. In its location, the temple appropriates the site and cave in which practices of other religious traditions later took place. While some visitors and scholars have decried the sharp contrast between the sculpted magnificence of the ancient cave and that of its most recent religious appropriation, the intimate relationship between the goddess temple and the Caitya Hall, and their enduring legacy as a pilgrimage site ensured the preservation and protection of its most ancient remains, thus making present-day studies like this one possible. The Caitya Hall expresses its unity of design and intentions of its creators through mathematical relationships affecting its proportions, arrangement, architectural components, and figural adornments. Included among the expression of such relationships are representations of gendered pairings, not only male-female pairs, but also compositions that generate subtle disparities when total numbers of feminine and masculine imagery are counted. The recurring numbers of 50 and 60 are prominent as well as their factors. Thus, one may focus upon the importance of 25, 50, 15, 30, and 60. In addition, the ratio of 60 to 50 is prominent, which may also be expressed and reduced to the ratio of 30 to 25 and simplified to 6 to 5. Lastly, the numbers 110 and 11 further emphasize the importance of 60 and 50, reflecting their sum, the sum of 60 and 50, and the sum of 6 and 5, respectively. The Caitya Hall interior measures 45 feet 6 inches in width, or 13.87 meters, and a similar approximate height from the floor to the apex of the interior. The height of the veranda is approximately 6/5 this measurement. Nagaraju has theorized that a specific unit of measure for this cave, perhaps the tala, was equal to 28 centimeters or 11 inches. If this is so, then the modern measurements may be recalculated as the following. And I placed these recalculations here on the right-hand side of this slide. Ideally, these measurements emphasize the numbers 50 and 60. The depth of the hall is similarly well proportioned and, despite complexity, emphasizes multiples or fractions of 50. Therefore, one may not be surprised that the Caitya Hall at Karle, which was likely the largest artificial cave in South Asia when it was created and the most highly ornamented, utilizing the rock-cut medium, exhibits evidence of both simple and complex mathematical relationships underlying its design and excavation. Of greater importance is the extent that other features, formal and sequential, also reflect these numbers as their sums, which will be a major topic engaged throughout the rest of this paper. The facade, sheltered within the veranda of the Caitya Hall, displays numerous repeated architectural ornaments, including a fenestration comprised of semicircular windows of various sizes, Vedikas, and other elements suggesting the material of wood, such as key joints projecting from flat surfaces of the stone, or timbers set into the windows perpendicular to the wall. For the most part, windows are stacked in tiers and registers to convey miniature stories that connote an enormous height. The exception to this stacked arrangement is the impressive central or Caitya window spanning these registers that permits light to illuminate the central hall. This enormous window is arrayed with elements either emulating wooden construction in stone or actually carved from wood that has survived from the ancient world to the present day. Below this central window, doorways near the ground level provide access to the interior hall and Pradakshina-pata. Each is topped with windows above their lintels. Similar ornaments, especially the semicircular windows, Vedikas, and wood-like elements, fill the lateral walls of the veranda above sculptures of elephants on the lowermost level. While orderly and highly organized in arrangement, just as on the facade, these features also seem to overwhelm and awe the spectator in their repetitive stacking, number, and height, even exceeding the vertical dimensions of the cave's central hall. More astonishing are the hidden relationships underlying the design of the facade and side walls of the Caitya hall at Karle. Specifically, the total number of windows on the facade equal 50, the ideal measurement of both the width and the height of the cave interior. The lateral walls of the veranda each display 30 windows, so that the total number of windows on these side walls equals 60, the ideal height of the veranda. Together, the sum of all of these semicircular windows and window ornaments in the Caitya hall is 110, including the 50 on the facade and the 60 total on the sides. Delving further into the features of the window ornaments on the facade yields additional correspondences. Emulating the wooden architectural tradition in rock-cut stone, windows enclose linear timbers arrayed inside the windows, projecting outwards from the walls. They are typically odd in number, as there is one such timber located below the crown of the arch, and then a symmetrical arrangement of other such members, hence an even number plus one equaling an odd number. The enormous window of the facade encompasses 29 of them total that divide the central window into 30 discrete sections. Window ornaments above the side doors flanking the central doorway display 15 such timbers each. Based upon the spacing of extant timbers, one may infer that the window ornament located directly above the central window also did so, despite later damage. Elsewhere, pillars serve as the location of figure ornament that reflect the numbers 15 and 30. The main hall of the cave possesses 30 pillars arranged linearly and ornamented with capitals and bases, with 15 on each side of the hall towards the stupa. In addition, one notes the existence of 7 additional pillars in back of the cave. Simpler in design, they consist of plain shafts that encircle the apsidal area around the stupa. They contrast with the highly ornamented pillars, and their integration into the ground plan proves crucial to the encoding of numerical symbolism discussed later in this presentation. The Caitya hall at Karle houses early examples of Mithuna, amorous figures connoting erotic familiarity with one another. Their usage at Karle, although well known, is more prevalent than usually reported. In fact, Mithuna groups comprise the predominant imagery throughout the Caitya hall, with over 200 figures sculpted in the veranda and in the cave interior. The most renowned series of Mithuna appears on the lowermost story of the veranda. 8 pairs of figures comprise this series, with 6 pairs flanking the 3 entrances to the hall, and the final 2 pairs on the narrow walls of the veranda opposite the facade that faces the interior. Differences aside, These and other pairs depicted throughout the cave constitute a unified sculptural program. Four more pairs of figures, two to either side, appear on the lateral walls higher than the previous 8. They're in standing poses and generally resemble the previous 8 examples depicted below them, except they are less rigidly frontal than the lower groups. An additional pair of figures occur on the facade wall. They contort into irregularly shaped fields on either side of the Caitya window. The skills of the artist at Karle in their depiction of the human figure are especially apparent in the graceful contortions of their bodies. Even here, the physical interaction between male and female reinforces their pairing and identification as Mituna. Furthermore, inscriptions within the veranda precisely identify the principal subject matter of sculptures found throughout the cave. Above 2 different pairs of figures on the right side, inscriptions varying slightly in syntax read Mituna, the pious gift of the monk Bodhisattva. There are 2 striking features of these inscriptions. First, they refer to the sculpted figures, male and female, in physical contact as Mituna. Second, they record monastic patronage of these 2 images. Both features gravely question past assertions that these sculptures portray donors or historical figures. Given that the donor of the sculptures was a monk and that the 2 sculptures he donated are identified specifically as Mituna, there's little chance that they are representations of him. In addition, they question the assertion that sculpted Mituna were somehow at odds with or considered inappropriate by the monastic community at Karle, given that a monk donated them. Other pairs or figural groups lack their own donative inscriptions. Even so, one may construct criteria to judge if other sculptures at Karle or at other sites depict this subject. One reliable criterion is the depiction of males and females in physical contact with one another. In addition, figural groups consistently depict either male and female couples, and in rare but notable examples, groups of 3 figures or more in which females outnumber males. Mituna imagery at Karle permeates throughout the hall and circumambulatory path of the cave, as pillars inside also display Mituna on their ornamented capitals. Facing the inner hall, 30 pillars possess capitals adorned with 2 elephants each, with 2 figures seated upon them. Male-female couples predominate and express intimacy and familiarity with one another, doing so through physical contact consisting of hands placed on shoulders, arms wrapped around their counterparts' waists, and similar gestures connoting physical familiarity. These same 30 pillar capitals typically display additional male-female pairs on the side facing the circumambulatory path of the cave. Male and female figures are each seated on an animal, oftentimes a horse or an elephant, as well as other types of animals, appearing in close proximity with one another. The constituents express their intimacy, that is to say, the male-female pair, through the act of touch, even while on their respective animal mounts that face opposite directions. Given these pairings, they too may be understood as being Mituna. One may note that a challenge to interpretation at Karle emerges when accounting for the predominance of Mituna imagery inside the Caitya hall. On the one hand, their ubiquitous presence may suggest a great significance in that they permeate nearly all interior spaces of the monument, ever present. On the other hand, one might point to a repetitiveness of imagery that ostensibly exhausts their meaning and encourages a reading as mere ornamentation, perhaps as pleasant sculptures, subordinated to a lost cycle of paintings inside the hall that can never be reconstructed. Beyond this latter viewpoint, though, may be an acknowledgement that the Matuna as depicted may not fulfill our expectations of repetitive sculptures. Beyond the latter viewpoint may be an acknowledgement that the Matuna as depicted show kind of an intolerance for diverse postures and gestures, rising above the status of mere symbol. Among the figures on the interior of the caves, even the elephants on which they sit possess trunks that twist and twirl to avoid uninspired repetition and to mitigate boredom. Thus, it is no surprise that the figures in the ambulatory, which are among the least visible due to the narrowness of the space, these figures, they ride a varied menagerie of creatures, with several of the faces of these creatures looking downwards to engage the viewer. Here, too, their execution suggests something beyond a stock symbol or generalized ornament, with a purpose meant to fulfill something beyond aesthetical goals of their creators. Indeed, one need not presume Matuna employed at Karle followed repetitive gendered pairings and arrangements. Exceptions have been either documented visually without comment or noted as curiosities in scholarly literature since the 19th century. There are exactly 5 exceptions among the ornamented capitals facing the central hall, located on the left 4th and 7th pillars and the right 2nd, 6th, and 7th pillars. Unlike the rest, these capitals display only one male figure paired with a female on an elephant, and 2 females seated together on the adjacent elephant. While not obvious in their digression from the imagery of the remaining 25 capitals, they differ by displaying pairs that are not separated as emphatically as those in the rest of the hall. Not only is the stone continuous between all 4 figures, but they are also arranged in such a way that the singular male depicted in every group of 4 occupies a space close to the female pair. Tactile communication, whether initiated by the male or the closest female on the other elephant, unites them. Details presented here of the right 2nd pillar and the right 6th pillar further illustrate how groupings of the 4 figures are united through the tactile relationships and overt gestures of grasping or reaching between pairs. Furthermore, this activity necessitates a contiguity of stone between seated pairs that does not occur among capitals comprised only of male-female couples. Other anomalies in figural imagery appear atop 2 other pillars, the left 14th pillar and the right 2nd pillar. In both cases, they display this imagery on the sides of their capitals facing the front and back of the cave. The left 14th pillar displays relief sculptures of standing Matuna in these locations and singular female figures on the sides of the 2nd right pillar. Finally, 2 pillars display relief carvings on sides with the shafts facing the hall. The right eighth pillar, shown here, and the left fifth pillar, which is not discussed in this presentation. The former is distinctive in its morphology, with a pillar shaft with 16 sides instead of being octagonal in cross-section. Rather than neglecting or dismissing all of these hitherto unexplained deviations of norms in the hall, I propose a new way to account for these features in an inclusive and holistic manner, relating design, spatial location, and mathematical or numerical analysis. Outlined below in my paper and in this presentation, it aspires to counter an unstated presumption that the patrons of the cave, whose inscriptions are found throughout the hall, impacted the execution of an iconographic or sculptural program, leading to various asymmetries and idiosyncratic features of execution. In fact, these features suggest the exact opposite, that they unify through their placement and execution by underscoring the mathematical relationships and the design of the hall at Karle. Under this proposed schema, sculptural remains demonstrate a coordinated plan of execution and deliberate integration with the calculated mathematical relationships of the cave. Numbering sequences of pillars may explain particular placements of these neglected, poorly understood, and seemingly anomalous cave features inside the Caitya hall at Karle. By numbering sequence, I refer to the practice of assigning numerals and reference to pillars based upon their locations and alignments inside of the cave. According to the most typical scholarly convention, identifications of ornamented pillars in the Caitya hall utilize their relative location, left and right, and numerical designation from the front of the hall to the back, from 1 to 15. For example, the first pillar is understood as the ornamented pillar closest to the entrance to one's left when entering the central hall, while the right eighth pillar is located by turning to one's right and counting from 1 to 8, beginning with the first pillar closest to the entrance and proceeding in a sequential ordering towards the back of the cave. This contemporary method serves especially useful for scholars to locate and convey relative spatial proximities of epigraphy, or when remarking upon unusual and anomalous features, just as I do thus far in this paper. However, no evidence suggests that the current prevailing method served the original architects, designers, or patrons of the Caitya hall. Rather, it provides a useful means for scholarly discussion and documentation. Alternative numbering sequences, when paired with the relative locations of exceptions and alleged deviations in imagery, reveal a profound and hitherto unknown order in the design of the Caitya hall. Notably, the factors and multiples of numbers that relate to measurement and sculpted components provide insights into other aspects of ornamentation, including the usage of figural imagery such as Matuna in the cave at Karle. Please note, though, that the purpose of this presentation is not to advocate replacing any numbering sequence currently in use by scholars, but to explore and explain the intent of the cave's creators. Two systems of numbering, at the very least, may have existed. These two alternative sequences are relatively simple and straightforward based upon the manner one may engage the central hall of the cave or its pradakshina, its path of circumambulation. They express spatial arrangements of pillars and imagery as experienced by practitioners within the sacred spaces of the cave. In the first numerical sequence, which takes into account entrance through the middle doorway located directly in front of the stupa, numbering of ornamented pillars begins with the first pillar on the left side of the hall. Thus, when one enters into the central hall of the cave, the first ornamented pillar to one's left is the first pillar. The corresponding one to the right is the second pillar. And then moving forward in direction towards the back of the cave, the next pillar on the left side is the third, and the corresponding one to the right is the fourth, and so on and so on. This schema continues in an orderly manner to account for ornamented pillars all the way through those located deepest in the cave, designated as the 29th and 30th pillars. Since the anomalous imagery we're talking about, those examples of the capitals with the extra female, they're located almost exclusively in the front half of the hall closest to the entrance. The diagram that I'm showing here gives us that numbering all the way through the 8th row. And so the asterisks here, they indicate the pillars with anomalous groupings that face the central hall. And those numbers in the sequence are the following: 4, 7, 12, 13, and 14. When one takes these numbers of the pillars and adds them together, it yields 50. As mentioned throughout the study, the number 50 holds a special significance in the design and adornment of the hall. It corresponds to the width and height of the hall. It supplies the number of semicircular windows carved into the facade wall, as well as as other relationships. A similar numerical relationship involving the pillars with anomalous groupings occurs through another counting sequence. In this case, their numbering is determined by the order in which each pillar is encountered when a visitor to the cave engages in the act of circumambulation. The ordering of pillars and their designation are as follows. And so in this case, we have a sequencing that proceeds as one enters the left side of the pathway of circumambulation around the hall and walks past the first 15 adorned pillars. Then there are those 7 unadorned pillars around the apsidal arrangement, or in apsidal arrangement around the back of the stupa. They are without capitals and bases and are numbered 16 through 22. The path then leads through the hall to the right side of the cave, passing each adorned pillar on the right side, numbered 23 through 37, as one completes the ritual path. So, according to this reckoning, the number of, or the designation of those anomalous pillar capitals may be the following: 4, 7, 31, 32, and 36, the sum of which is 110, which is both the sum of 50 and 60 and equal to the total number of arched windows in the veranda of the cave. It is also a multiple of 11, which is the sum of 6 and 5. 50 and 60 may reflect ancient measurements representing the dimensions of interior spaces in the Caitya hall, as well as in total numbers of these particular architectural ornaments and components. Previously, attention was given to the order, placement, and numerical sequence of anomalous groupings of figures. One may note that these atypical examples almost always increase the depiction of female figures. Seen in the 5 capitals with female-female pairs on elephants, and in the inclusion of 2 or more sculptures of standing females on the right second pillar. Among Mituna imagery, this increase sometimes results in displacement of male figural imagery, leading to an even greater disparity between the total number of female and male figures. The disparity may be expressed as a ratio between genders. This numerical ratio reflects the iconographic program of the central hall, consisting of the Mituna couples flanking each side of the main entrance, the males and females on the pillar capitals, visible on the sides facing the hall, and those on the adjacent sides of capitals, which include the Mituna on the left 14th pillar, according to modern numbering, and the 2 additional females on the right second pillar. The total number of these figures is 130. Of them, 71 are identifiable as females and 59 as males. These sums closely follow a ratio of 6 to 5, with females predominating over males in number. By dividing 130 into 11 parts and then multiplying this number by 6 or by 5, one obtains the following results. And so dropping down towards the bottom of the slide, you can see that here. So we have 130 that is divided into 11 parts, yielding this particular number that is fractional. Multiply that by 6, you get approximately 71. Multiply that same number by 5, and it yields approximately 59. Because the total number of females, 71 compared to the males, 59, occurs in a ratio closely approximating 6 to 5. The subtle shifts in gendered imagery now appear much less capricious when recalling this ratio appearing elsewhere, such as in the relative heights of the veranda of the central hall, or in the numbers of architectural elements, including semicircular windows divided between the lateral walls of the veranda and the sheltered facade, providing entry into the cave. They follow a mathematical relationship in conception, guiding the entire program of carving in the Caitya hall at Karle. Why assign the numbers 6 to females and 5 to males? This question does not concern the specific choice of 6 and 5, But keeping with the theme of this presentation, if whether or not there are any other indications carved in stone that may further reveal or suggest the intent of the cave's creators. I call attention to a pairing of pillars with unusual features that have already been mentioned, the left 14th pillar and the right 2nd pillar, according to modern scholarly designation. And so regarding the latter, it yields the greatest amount of female imagery among all pillars in the complex. Its capital both displays a pair of figures, females, on elephants facing the hall, and it possesses sculptures of singular females on each of its two lateral sides. Adding together the female figures on all four sides of this pillar, it yields the number 6. So you have the 3 facing the hall, the 1 facing the ambulatory, and then 1 and 1 on the lateral sides. So for a total of 6. Similarly, the left 14th pillar is equally distinguished in its unusual qualities. Besides having unusually slender proportions for its pillar shaft, it holds the greatest number of male figures and Matuna, totaling 5. A pair of Matuna couples on the capital facing the hall, the Matuna facing the ambulatory, and then 2 more on the sides of this pillar comprise its sculptural imagery. So that the total number of male figures is 2 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1. In this case, the imagery on this pillar yields a total number of males greater than any other pillar at the cave complex, simply due to the number of male-female couples that are carved atop its cabinet. There's something else about these 2 pillars and their relationship, which is rather intriguing too. Together, they are the penultimate ornamented pillar on the on one side of the cave, the left, and the second from the front on the right side. When circumambulating, the left 14th pillar remains the 14th pillar, while the right 2nd pillar is the 36th. When you add these numbers together, it equals the number 50. The right 8th pillar is the most obvious break from bilateral symmetry in the cave interior. It designates a significant location in the Caitya hall and was clearly meant to be prominent in its placement. As the 8th pillar on the right side, it is the middle pillar on that side, flanked by 7 ornamented pillars laterally in either direction, for a total of 15 on that side of the hall. But there are deeper correspondences that become apparent under close scrutiny that makes this pillar especially important. When one circumambulates the hall, one enters the left side of the production apata. You go by the 15 ornamented pillars on the left-hand side, and then you go around the apsidal area for an additional 7, and then the other additional 7, and then you reach the last or the 8th right pillar, which is also in this particular alternative sequence the 30th. Thus, the right 8th pillar is also the 30th pillar encountered along the path of circumambulation, according to the alternative numbering sequence already introduced. The prominence of the number 30 in the design of the Caitya Hall is emphasized in this instance as well, and may indicate its special importance. Other relationships highlight the special qualities of this highly ornamented pillar and its location inside of the hall. Among them, one may note the relationship of Mituna up to this point in the production of Pata. If one adds the two examples of standing Mituna on the typically unused sides of the capital atop the left 14th pillar. There are then the extra 2 from this pillar, plus the 15 from the pillars on the left side, plus the additional 8 encountered upon reaching this pillar while circumambulating. Adding these 3 numbers yields 25 once again. In addition to being the 30th pillar encountered in the production of Pata, it is the 16th pillar, according to the sequence emphasizing the ordering of pillars when viewed in the central hall. Its placement reflects a midpoint in the sculptural program. Pillars 1 through 15 are the first 15 pillars in the central hall. 16 through 30 are the second grouping. Because all of the gender disparities atop pillars are located previous to the 8th row, the numbers of male-female groupings facing the central hall from the 1st through 15 pillars is 25, which is half of the sum, as the total numbers of Mituna groups facing the central hall is 55. The remaining groups ornamenting the 15 pillars towards the back of the hall, number 30. Thus, this pillar marks a significant dividing point in both the iconographic program and in the sacred space, in which the numbers 25 and 50, or rather, I should say 25 and 30, are represented in figural imagery. These numbers, one may be reminded, are not just pleasant round numbers, but are half the major dimensions of the Caitya Hall and component spaces that we have discussed throughout this presentation. There are other correspondences that I could mention as well. The Caitya Hall at Karle displays the pinnacle of Mituna imagery and of figural sculpture generally. At early Buddhist cave sites, the figural imagery is ubiquitous throughout the cave along various architectural components, especially in zones or areas separating its veranda from the central hall and its central hall from the circumambulatory path. As mentioned throughout the study, their arrangements consist not only of male-female pairs predominantly, but also of females depicted in pairs or individually, the latter found on either side of the right second pillar facing the front and back of the cave. Counting all of these figural pairings and the 2 individual sculptures, their sum yields the following results. So we have the total number of standing Mituna in the veranda being 14, the total number of the seated pairs being 60, with the 2 pairs on the 30 pillars, the total seated pairs on pillar capitals facing the ambulatory being 30, the additional Mituna pairs being 2 on the left 14th pillar, and additional sculpted females on the right second pillar, being 2 sculptures as well, for a grand total of 108. Notably, this total of 108 sculptures is not based upon any conjectural reconstruction of adornment or presumptions about symmetry in arrangement. It's a wholly verifiable enumeration of existing sculptures in the hall, comprising all of the early Buddhist figures and groupings in the veranda, ambulatory, and hall of the cave. The number 108, of well-known significance in Indian thought, occurs in Buddhist literature. It's the total number of defilements, as well as in more auspicious context and enumerations. Instead of arguing a specific interpretation in its usage in this presentation, I seek to highlight it as indicative of yet another broader statement of intentionality among the original builders and designers of the cave. While significant, the presence of 108 figures and figural groupings provide a general unifying element to the sculptural program of the cave, alongside the other numbers recurring at Karle, reflecting harmony and order in its design. This presentation that I am giving you today is based upon a paper, and the last section I have is titled "A Notable Conjecture Regarding the Remains at Karle and Current Ritual Use." And so I did want to especially note that subtitle here, or heading, for the following couple paragraphs. The content of this paper thus far discusses the sculptural program of the Caitya Hall as it likely existed in the era of early Buddhism, and until later Buddhists cut images of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas into the wall of the veranda around the 5th to 6th century CE. Subsequent to these Buddhist eras of occupation, the cave would become a significant locus for worship of Ekvira Devi and for pilgrimage, especially by coastal populations and Hindus. Little is known regarding the origins of goddess worship at the site. One intriguing aspect of its continued veneration is the continued veneration of the stupa, sometimes identified as Dharma Raja, and its relationship with couples seeking to have children. Circumambulation, typically around a path between pillars and the stupa rather than through the circumambulatory path, may be practiced by married couples who later return after a successful birth with cradle or bassinet in hand. The presence of so many sculpted matuna at Karle within such a limited space, as well as the emphasis on male-female couples being especially prominent among this imagery, suggests a possible later reading of the site as a location for married couples to engage together in religious practices. In the previous section of the study, the total number of early Buddhist sculpted figures in the central hall was given as 130, and the closest approximation of the ratio of female to male equaling 6:5, with 71 female figures and 59 male figures. If one adds the presence of a man, married man and woman engaged in worship to this number, the number totals 132, with 72 females and 60 males. 132 is divisible by 11, 6 plus 5, exactly, and the ratio of females to males resolves to exactly 6:5 as well. The longevity of observed practices and associations at the site into the past is unknown, as is the origin of contemporary worship. However, I can recall no previous scholarly mention relating the sculpted display of gendered pairs of couples to ongoing religious practices involving couples worshiping. which seems a notable omission in the literature, or at least something worth saying at this point. In any case, contemporary rituals inside the Caitya hall, whether accidentally through reinterpretation of imagery or remembrance, complement the mathematical and harmonious ratio of gendered figures of the sculptural program as preserved in this cave up to the present. Over the course of this presentation, I've made the following principal claims. Dimensions of the cave, especially the heights of the central hall and veranda, emphasize 50 and 60 respectively, and the proportion of 6:5. Architectural features and ornamentation, including windows in the veranda and pillars with adornment in the hall itself, stress these numbers and their factors. 50 windows appear on the facade wall, and 30 windows appear on the left and right walls of the veranda, for a total number of 60 windows on the lateral walls. Rock-cut features resembling wooden timbers inside the windows also help to do so by dividing the Caitya window into 30 segments, and the windows positioned above the lintels of the doorways, each possessing 15 of these carved timbers. Inside the cave, a total of 30 adorned pillars separate the circumambulatory path and the central hall, with 15 on each side. Cave sculptures and the design of pillars reveal these numbers in various ways. Carved imagery of seated Matuna inside the hall includes variants that, when enumerated in uncomplicated sequences, such as according to the order they are approached when entering the hall or while traversing in a clockwise manner around the circumambulatory path, stress these same numbers and relationships when calculating the sum of designated locations of pillars. Depending on which numbering scheme is employed, the sums are either 50 or 110. 110 being with the sum of 50 and 60, and the total number of windows inside of the veranda. Furthermore, the right 8th pillar, which is the only 16-sided pillar inside the Caitya hall, is the 30th pillar encountered when performing circumambulation inside the cave. It is one of at least 2 sets of pillars that constitutes a pair, the other one being the 5th pair, which I did not talk about in this presentation. Finally, the variants in Matuna imagery, as well as 2 additional figural sculptures in the cave, tend to favor females over males. This disparity, when focused upon the sculptural program of the central hall, where all such variants and displacements are visible, approaches a ratio of 6:5. Through numerical and numerological analyses, this study has attempted to remedy a lacuna in analysis of the iconographic and sculptural programs at Karle, and to provide some possible way that one may understand the execution of particular features of its design, including architectural, decorative elements, and figural sculptures. While this study may not exhaust possible explanations for their deployment and their usage, the quantity of relationships that follow or reflect these recurring numbers in its myriad features is startling. These relationships underlie the design and execution of the hall to communicate an intentional and integrated approach towards the creation of one of the greatest examples of architecture from the ancient world. Thank you for your time today and for this opportunity to share my research with you. Thank you.